Bills piled on the chipped Formica counter. Final notices. Shut-off warnings. My son coughed from the bedroom, a wet, rattling sound that meant another trip to the pharmacy. My bank app blinked a balance of $12. Pride is a luxury for the rich. Survival is for the rest. You never really understand the physical weight of poverty until you find yourself doing the math of your life in the aisle of a brightly lit drugstore. It was a Tuesday. It had been raining for 3 days straight, the kind of cold, relentless drizzle that seeped through the thin soles of my sneakers and settled deep into my bones. I had just finished a 9-hour shift at the fulfillment center, scanning barcodes until the numbers blurred into meaningless gray lines. My lower back screamed with a dull, familiar ache. But I couldn't go home yet. Max was waiting. He was 6, small for his age, with a shock of unruly brown hair and lungs that decided to betray him whenever the weather turned damp. His asthma inhaler was empty. I stood at the pharmacy counter, the harsh fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like trapped hornets. The pharmacist, a tired-looking man with wire-rimmed glasses, clicked his mouse a few times. "Insurance denied it, Madeline," he said, not meeting my eyes. He wasn't a bad guy. He was just used to delivering bad news. "Try it again," I said, my voice tight. "They pre-approved it last month. I have the letter. I can pull it up on my phone. It's a different tier now. The manufacturer changed the formulation slightly, and your plan kicked it back. Out of pocket, it's $48. $48. I stared at the scarred white countertop. I had $12 in my checking account. I had a $10 bill folded in the pocket of my jeans. 22. I was $26 short of letting my son breathe comfortably. Panic isn't a sudden explosion. For single mothers, panic is a slow, cold water rising in a locked room. It starts at your ankles and creeps up to your throat. "Can you give me a partial?" I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper. I hated the begging. I hated the way my shoulders hunched, making myself smaller. "Just a few puffs, enough to get through the night. I get paid on Friday. You know I can't break an aerosol canister, Maddie. I'm sorry." I closed my eyes. The exhaustion washed over me, heavy and suffocating. I gripped the plastic edge of the counter until my joints ached. I needed to think. I could call Mrs. Gable down the hall, maybe borrow a 20. No, she was on a fixed pension. I could pawn the microwave. The pawn shop was closed. "Put it on this." The voice came from behind me. It was a low, resonant baritone, scraped of any particular emotion. I turned. He was standing about 2 feet away, holding a bottle of aspirin. He wore a dark wool overcoat that probably cost more than my car, tailored perfectly to a broad, tense frame. His hair was dark, damp from the rain, and his jaw held a tight, rigid line. But it was his eyes that caught me, slate gray, bloodshot, and utterly exhausted. He looked like a man who hadn't slept a full night in a decade. Before I could process what was happening, he reached past me and tapped a heavy black metal credit card against the reader. It beeped instantly. Approved. "Wait, no," I blurted, stepping back. My face burned. "You don't have to do that. I don't want your charity." He didn't even look at me. He looked at the pharmacist. "Ring up the aspirin, too, please." I said no, I repeated, louder this time. The humiliation was acidic, burning the back of my throat. I grabbed the white paper bag containing the inhaler and pushed it toward him. "Cancel the transaction." He finally looked at me. His gaze was flat, unreadable. "It's a piece of plastic with medicine in it. You need it. I bought it. It's done." "I don't know you." "You don't need to know me." He took his receipt, grabbed his aspirin, and turned to walk away. I chased him out the automatic doors. The cold rain hit my face instantly. "Hey!" I yelled over the sound of the traffic. He stopped on the wet pavement, turning slowly. He looked annoyed. "Look, miss, I have a migraine that is currently splitting my skull into two distinct hemispheres. I just wanted to expedite the line. Don't make this a thing." "It is a thing," I snapped, pulling a pen from my purse. I grabbed an old grocery receipt from the bottom of my bag. "Give me your name and address. I'll pay you back on Friday." He stared at me, the rain catching in his dark hair. He looked at the crumpled receipt in my hand, then at my worn-out jacket, then up to my eyes. For a fraction of a second, the annoyance flickered away, replaced by a sharp, clinical curiosity. "It's $48, he said quietly. "Let it go. To you, it's $48. To me, it's my dignity. I don't take handouts." I shoved the paper toward him. "Name, address." He studied me for a long moment. Then, he reached into his inner coat pocket and pulled out a sleek, minimalist business card. He handed it to me. The paper was incredibly thick. The text embossed in simple silver lettering. Harrison Cole, CEO, Coal Industries. No phone number, no address. Just the name of a company that owned half the commercial real estate in the city. "Keep the money," Harrison Cole said, his voice dropping an octave, blending with the sound of the rain. "Buy yourself a better umbrella." He turned and got into the back of a waiting black town car. The door shut with a heavy, expensive thud. I stood in the rain, clutching the life-saving medicine in one hand and the silver embossed card in the other, shaking with a mixture of profound relief and absolute, burning resentment. It took me 6 days to scrape together $48. I skipped lunch every day. I walked the 3 miles to the warehouse instead of taking the bus. I sold a stack of Mac's old board games to a second-hand shop. Every dollar was a physical victory, a brick I was laying to rebuild the wall of my independence. By Monday morning, I had 2 crumpled $20 bills, a 5, and 3 ones tucked into a cheap white envelope. Coal Industries was located in a towering obelisk of glass and steel in the center of the financial district. I walked through the revolving doors and felt the climate control hit me like a physical wall. The air in here didn't smell like the city. It smelled like ozone, expensive cologne, and money. The lobby was a sprawling expanse of white marble and abstract chrome sculptures. People walked with urgent, aggressive purpose, wrapped in suits that cost a year of my salary. I looked down at my scuffed boots and my faded utility jacket. I felt like a stray dog that had wandered into an operating room. I approached the front desk. The receptionist looked up from her monitor. Her smile was perfectly practiced and entirely dead. "Can I help you?" she asked, her eyes doing a quick, brutal assessment of my clothes. "I need to leave this for Harrison Cole," I said, placing the envelope on the polished stone counter. I had written his name on the front in black marker. She didn't touch it. "Does Mr. Cole have an appointment with you?" "Madeline, and no, it's personal. Just make sure he gets it." "I'm sorry, Madeline, but we don't accept unsolicited drop-offs for the executive team. I can direct you to our corporate mailing address." She slid the envelope back toward me with a manicured finger. "It's money," I said, my patience fraying. "I owe him money. Just put it in his inbox." "Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "What seems to be the problem?" The voice cut through the sterile hum of the lobby. I turned. Harrison Cole was walking toward the desk. He was flanked by 3 older men in gray suits holding tablets, trailing him like pilot fish on a shark. In the harsh daylight of the lobby, he looked even more imposing than he had in the rain. He wore a navy suit, no tie, the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone. He looked sharp, dangerous, and incredibly bored. Until he saw me, he stopped. The 3 men behind him scrambled to halt, nearly colliding. Harrison looked at me. He looked at my wet boots. He looked at the white envelope on the counter. Recognition sparked in his gray eyes, followed by a sudden, intense focus. "Mr. Cole," the receptionist said, her tone instantly shifting to a honeyed purr. "This woman was just leaving." "No, she wasn't," Harrison said. He stepped away from his entourage and walked over to me. He stood close enough that I could smell his soap. Something clean and sharp, like cedar. "You actually came." "I told you I pay my debts," I said, my voice trembling slightly. I hated that it trembled. He looked down at the envelope. "I told you to let it go. And I told you I don't take handouts." I picked up the envelope and shoved it against his chest. He reflexively caught it. "We have a board meeting in 4 minutes, Harrison," one of the suits said, checking a heavy gold watch. "The acquisition team is waiting." Harrison didn't look at them. He kept his eyes on me. He opened the unsealed envelope. He pulled out the cash. He counted it. He stopped. He looked at the bills, then looked back at me. His brow furrowed. "There's only $5 here." The air left my lungs. The entire lobby seemed to freeze. The receptionist smirked. The suits exchanged exasperated glances. I stared at the single $5 bill in his hand. The reality of the morning came crashing back down on me. The loud bang on the highway, the blown tire on my ancient Honda, the tow truck driver who refused to hook up the car until I handed him $43 cash, every penny I had except for that last, pathetic $5 bill. I had been so determined to get here, so blinded by my need to prove myself, that my exhausted brain had completely disconnected from the math. I had walked the remaining 2 miles to his office, carrying an envelope that was basically empty. The sheer absurdity of my life, the relentless, grinding comedy of my poverty, finally broke me. My vision blurred. A hot tear spilled over my lower lash line, cutting a path down my cold cheek. I tried to wipe it away, but another followed. And then another. My chest heaved. I was crying in the middle of a billionaire's lobby over a piece of paper. "I only have $5, I sobbed, the words tearing out of my throat, raw and ugly. "My tire blew. The tow truck took the rest. I walked here to give you $48, and I only have $5. I have nothing. I'm sorry. I'm so stupid." I turned to run. I just wanted to disappear. A hand caught my wrist. It wasn't a hard grip, but it was incredibly firm, warm. I froze, looking back. Harrison Cole stepped closer. He turned his back to the receptionist. He shifted his broad shoulders, deliberately positioning his body to block the view of the executives behind him. He created a wall between me and the judging eyes of his world. He didn't look away from my face. People usually look away when you cry. They look at their shoes. They find a spot on the wall. Harrison just watched me, steady and unblinking. The harsh lines of his face softened. The cynical exhaustion in his eyes cleared, replaced by something deep and painfully human. He smiled. It wasn't a smirk or a polite corporate gesture. It was a small, quiet, genuine smile that changed his entire face. He leaned in, his voice dropping so low it was just a vibration between us. "And I only have eyes for you," he said gently. I stared at him, my breath hitching. "What?" "Look around," he murmured. "Look at these people. They spend their entire lives pretending. Pretending they have power, pretending they don't hurt, pretending they have it all figured out. You are the only real thing in this entire building." He took the $5 bill, folded it neatly, and slid it into his breast pocket. "Debt paid." "Harrison," the suit barked from behind him. "The meeting." Harrison didn't turn around. "Cancel it. Tell them I'm taking a personal hour." "You can't be serious. The merger—" "I said cancel it, Tom," Harrison snapped, the warmth vanishing from his voice, replaced by absolute cutting authority. He looked back down at me, his expression softening again. "Come on. You need a coffee. And I need to get out of this room. He didn't take me to a fancy bistro with linen napkins and a valet. He walked me 3 blocks in the biting wind to a dingy corner diner that smelled of burnt grease and industrial cleaner. The bell above the door jingled a broken, off-key note. We sat in a vinyl booth taped up with duct tape. I kept my hands wrapped around a thick ceramic mug of black coffee, letting the heat seep into my numb fingers. Harrison sat across from me. He looked ridiculous in this setting. His suit was a masterpiece of Italian tailoring, completely at odds with the sticky laminate table. Yet, he looked more relaxed than he had in the sterile white lobby of his own building. "You didn't have to do this," I said, staring at the swirling dark liquid in my cup. "You could have just taken the $5 and let me leave. You would have walked back out into the cold, beaten down, hating yourself for a blown tire you couldn't control," Harrison said. He wasn't drinking anything. He was just watching me. I didn't want that. Why do you care? I looked up, meeting his slate-gray eyes. "You don't know me. You buy companies for breakfast. Why do you care if some broke single mother feels bad about a tire?" He leaned back, resting his arm along the back of the booth. He looked tired again, but it was a different kind of tired. It wasn't the tension of the pharmacy. It was a bone-deep weariness. "My father built coal industries from a single hardware store," Harrison said slowly, his voice rough. "He worked 80-hour weeks. He missed every birthday, every baseball game. When he died, he left me an empire and a ledger of transactional relationships. Everyone in my life wants something: a job, an investment, a donation, a piece of the pie. Every conversation I have is a negotiation." He tapped a finger on the table. "Last week I paid $48 for a kid's inhaler because I had a headache and wanted to get to my car. That's the truth. I wasn't being a savior. I was being selfish." He paused. "And then you chased me into the rain. You were soaked, you were shaking, and you were angry. You didn't want my money. You demanded to pay me back. Do you have any idea how long it's been since someone looked at me and didn't see a walking ATM?" I swallowed hard. "I just didn't want to owe anyone." "I know," he said softly. "That's what makes you real, Madeline." We talked for an hour. He didn't offer to pay for my tire. He didn't offer me a job at his company. He seemed to understand, instinctively, that throwing money at me would ruin whatever fragile thing was happening between us. Instead, he asked about Max. He asked about the warehouse. He listened with a forensic intensity, absorbing every detail of my life. I found myself telling him about the mold in my bathroom that I couldn't scrub away. I told him about the way Max's laugh sounded like a hiccup when he was genuinely amused. I told him about the crushing daily mathematics of surviving on minimum wage, and he listened. He didn't pity me. He didn't give me unsolicited advice about budgeting. He just witnessed me. "I need to go," I said finally, looking at the clock above the counter. "My neighbor watches Max until 3, but I have to pick him up." "I'll drive you." "I can take the bus." "Madeline," he said, a faint smile playing on his lips. "Let me drive you." His car was exactly what you'd expect. A low, sleek black sedan with tinted windows and an engine that purred silently. The drive to my neighborhood took 20 minutes. The transition from the financial district to the east side was stark. The glass towers gave way to brick tenements, pawn shops, and cracked sidewalks littered with wet trash. He pulled up in front of my building. The front door was propped open with a cinder block because the lock had been busted for 6 months. A teenager was smoking on the front stoop. I felt a sudden sharp spike of shame. I didn't want him to see this. I didn't want the reality of my life to tarnish the strange bubble we had built in the diner. "Well," I said, grabbing the handle, "this is me. I'll walk you up." "No." I said it too quickly. "No, you don't need to do that. It's a walk-up. 4th floor." Harrison put the car in park and killed the engine. He turned to me. Madeline, look at me. I reluctantly met his gaze. I don't care about the peeling paint, he said, reading my mind with terrifying accuracy. I don't care about the neighborhood. I care that you're safe, and I want to make sure you get through your door. We walked up the narrow, dimly lit stairwell. The air smelled of stale cooking oil and damp carpet. My heart was pounding, a strange mixture of anxiety and a fluttering sensation I hadn't felt in years. We reached my door. Number 4B. The paint around the deadbolt was chipped. I fumbled with my keys. Thank you for the coffee and the ride. What about the car? He asked. It's sitting in a mechanic's lot. I'll figure it out. I always do. Harrison stood close. In the cramped hallway, his physical presence was overwhelming. He reached out, his large hand gently covering mine over the keys. His skin was warm. I know you will figure it out, he said quietly. But you don't always have to do it completely alone. He didn't lean in to kiss me. He didn't cross the line. He just squeezed my hand, a grounding, solid pressure, before taking a step back. Can I take you to dinner on Friday? He asked. A real dinner, not a diner, not a transaction, just you and me. I looked at this man, a billionaire who had stood between me and my humiliation, who had listened to my fears without trying to buy them away. Friday, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Okay. He smiled, a full, real smile that reached those tired gray eyes. I'll see you Friday, Madeline. He turned and walked down the stairs, his footsteps echoing in the quiet stairwell. I unlocked my door and stepped inside, feeling a strange, unfamiliar warmth spreading through my chest. For the first time in a very long time, I wasn't doing the math. I was just breathing. Friday arrived with the agonizing slowness of a ticking clock in a quiet room. I spent 45 minutes staring into my narrow closet. My wardrobe was a graveyard of practical choices. Khakis for the warehouse, faded denim for errands. A single black dress I wore to my grandmother's funeral 3 years ago. It smelled faintly of mothballs and stale church air. I put it on. It hung loosely around my shoulders. I paired it with my only decent boots, scrubbing a damp paper towel over the scuffs until the cheap leather shone weakly. Mrs. Gable came over at 7 to watch Max. She was 72, a retired school teacher who smelled of peppermint and strong black tea. She took one look at me, her sharp blue eyes missing nothing. You look terrified, Madeline, she said, pulling a worn deck of cards from her cardigan pocket for her nightly game of Go Fish with Max. I am, I admitted, tugging at the hem of the dress. I feel like an imposter, like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life. Good. Comfort makes people lazy. She patted my cheek with a dry, papery hand. Go. Let the man buy you a meal. You've carried the sky on your shoulders for a long time. It's okay to set it down for a couple of hours. A horn tapped lightly outside. Not a blare, just a soft double chirp. I kissed Mac's forehead. He was already engrossed in the cards, his breathing even and quiet thanks to the inhaler. I grabbed my purse and walked down the 4 flights of stairs. My stomach was a tight, coiled spring. Harrison was waiting by the curb. He wasn't in the sleek black town car. He was leaning against a dark gray SUV, wearing dark jeans, leather boots, and a heavy charcoal sweater that made his shoulders look impossibly broad. The lack of a suit threw me. It stripped away the billionaire armor and left just the man. He opened the passenger door for me. You look beautiful. It wasn't a line. He said it like he was stating a simple, indisputable fact, like noting the weather. I felt a flush creeping up my neck. I smell like mothballs, I muttered, climbing into the heated leather seat. Harrison laughed. It was a rich, chest-deep sound. You smell like rain and cheap vanilla soap. I like it. He drove us to a quiet neighborhood on the edge of the city. The restaurant wasn't a velvet-roped monstrosity with a bouncer. It was a small, dimly lit tavern with exposed brick walls, heavy oak tables, and a menu written in chalk on the wall. It was expensive. I could tell by the heavy silverware and the hushed, attentive way the waiter hovered. But it wasn't intimidating. It was intimate. We ordered. I deliberately didn't look at the prices. I forced myself to look at them. "Why here?" I asked, tracing the rim of my water glass. "No press. No board members trying to corner me near the restrooms," Harrison said, resting his forearms on the table. "And the steak doesn't taste like corporate anxiety." The food arrived, rich and heavy. For the first 20 minutes, I felt the awkwardness of the gap between us. I was hyper-aware of which fork to use, hyper-aware of how I chewed. But Harrison had a disarming way of dismantling tension. He asked about the warehouse logistics, genuinely interested in the supply chain failures I dealt with daily. He listened without interrupting. Then the outside world intruded. "Harrison, God, I thought that was you." A man stopped at our table. He wore a sharply tailored suit and a gold watch that caught the dim candlelight. He had the kind of aggressive confidence that only comes from generational wealth. He looked at Harrison with a wide, artificial smile. Then his eyes slid to me. The smile didn't fade, but it changed. It became calculating, cold. "Gregory," Harrison said. His voice dropped 10 degrees. He didn't stand up. "I was just telling Sarah I saw you," Gregory said, gesturing vaguely to a table across the room. "We're still waiting on those projections for the offshore accounts. Your legal team is dragging their feet. This isn't an office, Greg." I know. Just doing my diligence." Gregory looked at me again. His gaze lingered on the slightly frayed collar of my black dress. "I don't believe we've met. I'm Gregory Vance. I head up acquisitions." He held out a hand. I hesitated, then reached out to take it. "Madeline?" He shook it briefly, his grip limp. "Madeline? What firm are you with?" He knew exactly what he was doing. It was a subtle, surgical strike to establish the hierarchy. "She's not with a firm," Harrison said before I could open my mouth. The quiet authority in his voice snapped like a whip. "And we are in the middle of our dinner." Gregory held his hands up in mock surrender. "All right, message received. I'll have my assistant email yours." He gave me a final, dismissive nod. "Lovely to meet you, Madeline." He walked away. The silence left in his wake was suffocating. I looked down at my plate. Suddenly, the steak tasted like ash. The illusion of the evening shattered, leaving the sharp, jagged edges of reality exposed. "I'm sorry," Harrison said quietly. "He's an arrogant vulture." "He's your world," I replied, my voice tight. "And he's right. I don't belong here." He looked at me like I was a charity case you brought in from the cold. "I don't care how he looks at you." "But I do," I snapped, looking up at him. The frustration I had been holding back flared. "You get to take off the suit and play normal for a night. But tomorrow, you go back to the glass tower. You go back to the billions. I go back to the warehouse. I go back to checking my bank account before I buy milk." That man looked at me the way everyone in your life is going to look at me. Harrison's jaw tightened. He tossed his napkin onto the table. "You think this is a game to me? I think this is a vacation for you. A temporary break from your reality." He stared at me. The gray in his eyes darkened. He reached across the table and grabbed my hand. I tried to pull back, but he held firm. "My reality is a room full of people who would step over my bleeding body to secure a stock option," Harrison said, his voice a low, fierce whisper. "My reality is an empty penthouse that echoes when I walk through it. Yes, I have money. It buys a lot of things. But it doesn't buy the way my chest physically seized up when I saw you crying in my lobby. It doesn't buy the fact that I've thought about nothing but you for 4 days." He let go of my hand, his breathing slightly elevated. "I'm not playing a game, Madeline. I am terrified. Because for the first time in my life, I want something I can't buy. And I have absolutely no idea how to earn it." The anger drained out of me, replaced by a sudden heavy ache. I looked at this powerful, imposing man and saw the profound, isolating loneliness underneath. We didn't talk much on the drive back. The silence wasn't angry. It was heavy with the weight of what had been said. He parked outside my building. The streetlights flickered against the wet pavement. I unbuckled my seatbelt. "Thank you for dinner, Harrison." "Madeline!" I turned. He was looking at me, the shadows of the car highlighting the sharp angles of his face. He reached out, his fingers brushing a stray lock of hair behind my ear. His touch was electric, sending a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. He leaned in slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away. I didn't. When his lips met mine, it wasn't perfectly choreographed. It was hesitant at first, a careful testing of boundaries. Then, I closed my eyes and kissed him back. The kiss deepened, desperate and grounding. His hand slid to the back of my neck, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. It tasted like rain, an expensive wine, and something entirely new. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing heavily. I rested my forehead against his shoulder for a second, just listening to the steady, reassuring thud of his heart beneath the heavy wool of his sweater. "I have to go up," I whispered. "I know." He kissed the top of my head. "Can I see you tomorrow?" I looked at the peeling paint of my building, then back at him. "Tomorrow is Saturday. I have Max all day. Then I'll see both of you tomorrow." He showed up at 10 in the morning carrying 2 things. A brown paper bag from a local bakery that smelled like warm sugar, and a complicated-looking plastic model of the Apollo 11 Saturn V rocket. Max was sitting on the living room rug, wearing mismatched socks and pushing a faded plastic fire truck over the worn carpet fibers. When Harrison knocked, I opened the door in my sweatpants and an oversized college t-shirt. I hadn't dressed up. Well, if he was going to be in my life, he needed to see it exactly as it was. No filters, no black dresses. Harrison stepped inside. The apartment instantly felt smaller. He set the bakery bag on the kitchen counter and looked down at the rug. Max stopped pushing the truck. He stared up at the giant man with wide, cautious brown eyes. Max was used to it, just being the two of us. Intruders in our sanctuary were rare. "Max, this is my friend Harrison," I said softly, staying near the door. Harrison didn't tower over him. He dropped to one knee, the joint giving a loud, mortal pop that made me wince. He set the rocket box on the floor. "Hey, Max," Harrison said, keeping his voice low and steady. "Your mom told me you like space." Max looked at the box, his eyes widened slightly. "That has a lunar module inside." "It does," Harrison confirmed. "It has 3 stages, and the command module detaches. I was going to try and build it myself, but I'm terrible with the tiny pieces. Think you could help me?" It was a brilliant maneuver. He didn't demand a hug. He didn't talk down to him in a baby voice. He offered a job. He offered respect. Max looked at me for permission. I nodded. For the next 2 hours, the billionaire CEO of Coal Industries sat cross-legged on my cheap rug, sorting tiny plastic thrusters and reading instruction manuals with a 6-year-old. I watched them from the kitchen, leaning against the counter with a cup of coffee. I watched the way Harrison patiently held a piece steady, while Max's small, clumsy fingers snapped another into place. I watched the way Harrison listened, really listened, when Max went on a breathless, rambling tangent about how black holes swallow light. A tight, hard knot in my chest, a knot I had carried since the day Max's father walked out before he was even born, began to loosen. It terrified me. Survival makes you cynical. You learn to expect the drop. You learn that every stroke of good luck is just the universe winding up for a harder punch. Letting myself believe in this, believing that a man like Harrison could simply exist in this cramped, chaotic apartment and want to stay, felt like stepping off a cliff in the dark. Around noon, Max ran to the bathroom. Harrison stood up, stretching his back with a quiet groan, and walked into the kitchen. He leaned against the counter next to me. Our shoulders brushed. "He's a smart kid," Harrison said, looking toward the hallway. "Got his mother's eyes." "He got my stubbornness, too," I said, looking down at my coffee mug. Harrison turned his head, studying my profile. "You're quiet today." "I'm just processing." I set the mug down. The porcelain clicked against the laminate. "Harrison, I need you to understand something. I don't have a safety net. If I fall, there is nothing underneath me. It's just concrete. If you get bored in a month, or if your world decides I'm too much of a liability, you'll go back to your penthouse and your board meetings. And I will be left here, trying to explain to my son why the man who built rockets with him disappeared." I finally looked up at him. My eyes were burning. "I can't afford to be broken by you." Harrison didn't flinch. He didn't offer empty platitudes or sweep me into a dramatic embrace. He stayed perfectly still, absorbing the absolute gravity of my words. He reached out and took my hands. His grip was calloused and warm. "I spend every day of my life minimizing risk," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble in the quiet kitchen. "I calculate variables. I project outcomes. I don't gamble. But Madeline, the second you chased me out into the rain, the math went out the window." He stepped closer. The smell of cedar and rain wrapped around me. "I'm not a tourist in your life," he continued, his gray eyes locked onto mine with a fierce, unshakable clarity. "I'm not here to fix your problems with a checkbook, and I'm not here until something better comes along. I am here because the only time I actually feel like I'm breathing is when I'm in this room with you." He lifted one hand from mine and pressed his palm against my cheek, his thumb brushing away a deer I hadn't realized had fallen. "I don't have a safety net either," he whispered. "I've just been falling for years. You're the first solid ground I've hit." I closed my eyes, leaning into his touch. The cynicism, the relentless defensive armor I had worn for 6 years finally cracked. I didn't need him to save me. I had already saved myself 1,000 times over. But as he wrapped his arms around me, pulling me against his chest, I realized I didn't have to fight the entire world alone anymore. From the living room, Max yelled, Mom! Harrison! The command module is ready for launch." Harrison pulled back slightly, a slow, brilliant smile breaking across his face. He looked at me, his eyes shining with a quiet, grounded joy. "Houston," he murmured, his forehead resting against mine. "We are ready for liftoff." I laughed, a wet, genuine sound that bubbled up from the very bottom of my lungs. The stack of bills was still sitting on the Formica counter. The faucet still had a slow, annoying drip. The world had magically transformed into a fairy tale. But as I grabbed Harrison's hand and pulled him back into the living room, the weight of it all didn't feel so crushing anymore. We had a long way to go. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the math. Did Madeline and Harrison's story hit close to home? Love doesn't always look like a fairy tale. Sometimes it starts with a broken-down car and a heavy dose of reality. If you love this grounded romance, hit that like button and share it with someone who appreciates a real human connection. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more deeply emotional, raw stories every single week. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Madeline's shoes?